Meet Jessica, a pastor's daughter. To the world, she is the perfect, innocent girl. But behind closed doors, she lived a double life. She craved freedom, but it led her into the hands of danger.
Growing up as the daughter of a pastor in a Nugu state hasn't been easy for me. My name is Jessica, and I'm 27 years old now. But trust me, my life has been anything but ordinary. Everyone expects me to be the perfect child, the shining example of righteousness and discipline. They think my life is full of prayers, Bible studies, and angelic smiles. But deep down, I've always wanted more. Being Pastor E's only daughter meant I had to live under strict rules. Everything I did was monitored. What I ate, how I laughed, even how I walked. Jessica, don't laugh so loudly. It's not ladylike. Jessica, that dress is too tight. You'll lead the brethren astray. They controlled everything, from what I wore to how I spoke. Even Coca-Cola was a sin in my house. But I've never been one to just sit quietly and obey. I love to have fun, laugh, and enjoy life. I want to hang out with friends, dance, and feel alive. My parents, they refused to let me go out. So I had to find a way to make my own rules. At 17, I decided enough was enough. If my parents wouldn't give me freedom, I'd take it for myself. One day, I secretly duplicated the house keys. It was my little act of rebellion. Every night, after we finished family prayers and everyone went to bed, I'd wait until the house was silent. Then, I'd grab my backpack, sneak out the back door, and head into the city. I always kept my essentials ready in my bag. A pack of cigarettes, my favorite whiskey, and a lighter. I loved the thrill of sneaking out, meeting my friends, and enjoying the night. Nobody knew about my secret life. By day, I was the perfect pastor's daughter, and by night, I was Jessica the wild one. My friends would always say, "Jessica, how can you drink so much and still stand?" I'd laugh and tell them, "Practice makes perfect." It's true, I could finish a whole bottle of alcohol and still walk in a straight line. One of the most unforgettable moments in my life happened when I was 17. My parents went away for a 2-day crusade in Abuja, leaving me at home with our family cook. She was a middle-aged woman who didn't care much about what I did, as long as I didn't cause trouble for her. With my parents out of the way, I invited my boyfriend Daniel over. He was charming, with dimples that could make anyone smile. And he had this mischievous way of looking at me that always made me laugh. We were sitting in the living room, joking and laughing, when things started to heat up. One thing led to another. And before I knew it, we were in my father's bedroom. Yes, my father's room. Of all the places in the house, that's where it happened. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, in the same room where my dad would pray and preach about holiness, losing my virginity to my boyfriend. In the middle of everything, our cook walked in. I froze, thinking I was about to be in serious trouble. But instead of scolding me, she just gave me a knowing look and said, I didn't see anything, and walked out. From that day, I knew I could trust her to keep my secrets. The cook and I had a strange relationship. She wasn't just good at keeping secrets. She also had this way of saying the most unexpected things. One day, while we were in the kitchen, she handed me a cucumber and said, "Jessica, you know, if men stress you too much, there are alternatives." I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the stool. She just smiled and walked away, leaving me with the cucumber in my hand and a head full of questions. Now, every time I see a cucumber, I can't help but laugh. At parties, when someone offers me cucumber salad, I have to stop myself from bursting out laughing. The memories are just too much. Even though my parents think they've raised the perfect daughter, I've always been good at keeping my secrets. They don't know I drink, smoke, or party. They don't know I've been sneaking out of the house for years. They don't know I've lived a life that's completely different from the one they imagine for me. To this day, I'm still finding ways to live my life on my own terms. I know I'm not perfect, but who is? All I want is to be free, to have fun, and to enjoy the life I've been given. My life took a turn that even I couldn't have predicted. Sneaking out every weekend had become my routine, my secret rebellion against the life my parents tried to force on me. I was living my best, or maybe worst, life, and I didn't care. Whenever I was out, the clubs were my escape. The loud music, flashing lights, and carefree laughter made me forget all the rules, restrictions, and expectations waiting for me back home. But it wasn't just about the music or the drinks, it was about the men. I loved the attention. When a man approached me, flashing a charming smile or whispering sweet words in my ear, I couldn't resist. It became a game for me. Every week, a new man. Every weekend, a new adventure. The thrill of sneaking out and getting tipsy was addictive. With just a few shots of whiskey or vodka, I felt untouchable, bold, and free. My inhibitions would disappear, and that's when the real fun would begin. Sometimes the fun was innocent, just dancing and laughing with friends. But other times, it wasn't. There were nights when the chemistry with a guy was too strong to ignore. We'd find a quiet corner, a dark alley outside the club, or even a stall in the club's restroom. It didn't matter where, as long as we could let the moment take over. I knew I was becoming reckless, but I couldn't stop. Each night out was a rush, a reminder that I could live the life I wanted, even if only for a few hours. Back at home, I had a boyfriend. Daniel was everything a girl could ask for. Kind, caring, and deeply in love with me. He believed I was the innocent, God-fearing daughter of two pastors, the kind of girl who'd never set foot in a club, let alone drink or smoke. Daniel had dreams for us. He wanted to marry me, build a home with me, and spend the rest of his life by my side. He trusted me completely, and I let him. "Jessica, I thank God every day for you," he would say, holding my hand and looking into my eyes. "You're a rare gem, a virtuous woman. I know you'll make the best wife and mother one day." I'd smile and nod, but deep down I knew I didn't deserve his trust. I wasn't the woman he thought I was. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth. One Friday night, I dressed up as usual and waited for my parents to fall asleep. The moment the house was silent, I grabbed my bag and slipped out. The club was buzzing when I arrived, the air thick with music, sweat, and the smell of alcohol. That night, a man caught my eye. He was tall, dark, and dangerously handsome, with a confidence that drew me in immediately. He introduced himself as Kelvin. His voice was smooth, his smile intoxicating, and his words felt like poetry. "You're different, Jessica," he said, leaning in close as we danced. "You have this energy about you. I can't explain it, but I need to know more." I laughed. The kind of laugh that comes easily when you've had one too many drinks. "Maybe you'll find out if you're lucky." Kelvin was persistent, and by the end of the night, I was completely drawn to him. He seemed different from the other men I'd met. Charming, but with an edge that intrigued me. When he suggested we leave the club together, I didn't hesitate. Kelvin wasn't like the others, though. What I didn't know was that he wasn't at the club just to have fun. He had a plan, an evil plan. Kelvin was a member of a dangerous cult, a group of ritualists who used unsuspecting women for their dark practices. He had been given an assignment: find a girl, pretend to love her, get her pregnant, and then deliver her to the group. I didn't see it coming. Kelvin played his role perfectly. He was attentive, sweet, and everything I thought I wanted in a man. Over the next few weeks, he kept in touch, texting me, calling me, and making me feel like I was the center of his world. But there were signs, subtle ones that I ignored. Sometimes he would disappear for days without explanation. Other times, his mood would shift suddenly, his eyes darkening in a way that made me uneasy. It was another one of those trips. My parents had gone off for a church program in another state, leaving me alone in the house. They trusted that the cook and their rules would keep me in line. But I was already planning my freedom the moment their car drove off. This time, I didn't waste a second. As soon as they left, I packed a small bag and headed straight to Kelvin's house. It was a cozy apartment tucked away in a quiet part of town, and it felt like a sanctuary compared to the suffocating walls of my parents' home. Kelvin was as charming as ever. He greeted me with a warm smile, pulling me into a hug as though he'd been waiting all his life for that moment. "Jessica, my queen," he said, kissing my forehead. "You're finally here. Let me take care of you." The first night was magical. At least it seemed that way. We laughed, drank, and danced in his living room. And for the first time in a long while, I felt free. The next morning, I woke up feeling strange. My stomach churned, and before I could make sense of what was happening, I was rushing to the bathroom to throw up. Kelvin followed me, holding my hair back as I leaned over the sink. "Jessica, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I don't know," I mumbled, wiping my mouth. "Maybe I drank too much last night." But Kelvin wasn't convinced. He insisted we go to the hospital. I was reluctant at first, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. "Please, Jess," he said, holding my hand. "I care about you. Let's just make sure everything's fine." At the hospital, the news hit me like a thunderbolt. "Congratulations," the doctor said, smiling. "You're pregnant." I stared at him in disbelief. Pregnant? How? When? My mind raced as I tried to piece it all together. Kelvin, on the other hand, looked ecstatic. "This is amazing," he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "Jessica, this is a blessing. I've always dreamed of starting a family with someone like you." His words melted my initial shock, and I started to believe him. Maybe this was a good thing. Maybe Kelvin really was the one for me. That same morning, as I was still processing the news, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Jessica, where are you?" she asked, her tone unusually sharp. "I'm at home," I lied, glancing nervously at Kelvin. "Are you sure?" she pressed. "Let me call the cook and ask." Panic shot through me, but I had already covered my tracks, arranging with the cook to back up my story if my parents called. "Yes, Mama, I'm home. You can ask the cook," I replied, trying to sound as innocent as possible. There was a pause on the line, and then my mother spoke again, her voice low and serious. "Jessica, something doesn't feel right. I've been praying, and I keep getting this feeling that you need to be careful. Please, my daughter, don't go out today. Stay home, no matter what." I brushed it off, telling her I'd be fine. After all, what could possibly go wrong? Kelvin seemed more excited than ever that morning. "Jessica," he said, holding my hand, I want to take you to meet my parents. They live close by, and I think it's time they met the love of my life." His words made my heart flutter. Everything was happening so fast, but I liked Kelvin. I trusted him. And with a baby on the way, meeting his family seemed like the next logical step. I didn't think twice when he led me to his car. I didn't question why he seemed nervous, or why his phone kept buzzing with the messages he didn't answer. I was too caught up in the moment, in the idea of a future with him. As we drove, I noticed we were heading out of town. "I thought you said your parents live close by," I asked, glancing at him. "They do," he replied quickly, flashing me a smile. "It's just a little farther than I remembered." Something about his tone made me uneasy, but I pushed the thought aside. Kelvin wouldn't hurt me. He loved me. As we approached a secluded area, my unease grew. The roads became narrower, the trees denser, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Kelvin, are you sure this is the right way?" I asked. My voice tinged with doubt. "Trust me, Jessica," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "You'll love my parents. They can't wait to meet you." But deep down, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. My mother's words echoed in my mind. "Something doesn't feel right. Be careful." Just as I was about to press him further, Kelvin pulled the car to a stop in front of an old, abandoned-looking building. My heart sank. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Kelvin didn't answer. Instead, he stepped out of the car and walked around to my side, opening the door for me. "Come on," he said, his smile now feeling forced. "Let's go inside." Kelvin held my hand firmly as he led me into the old eerie building. The dim light of the room revealed several men, all dressed in crimson robes. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of incense, and strange markings adorned the walls. My heart raced as I realized something terrible was about to happen. "Kelvin?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What's going on? Where are your parents?" But Kelvin didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the center of the room, where an elderly man sat on a high chair surrounded by burning candles. The man's eyes were cold, his face expressionless. "Is this the girl?" the old man asked, in a deep, gravelly voice. "Yes," Kelvin replied, his tone unusually serious. "She's the one." Panic surged through me as the men began chanting in unison. I tried to pull away, but two men grabbed me, forcing me to kneel before the old man. Tears streamed down my face as I begged Kelvin to stop. "Kelvin, please. What are you doing?" I screamed, but he avoided my gaze. The old man stood, raising his hands as the chants grew louder. "The sacrifice is ready," he declared. "Prepare her for the ritual." Two men brought a strange bowl filled with what looked like blood and placed it on the ground in front of me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and regret. As the old man began chanting, he suddenly paused, his expression turning to one of confusion. He leaned closer, inspecting me as though something wasn't right. Then, with a sharp voice, he commanded, "Kelvin, come forward." Kelvin hesitated, but eventually stepped closer. The old man looked at him with piercing eyes. "You lied to us," he said. "What? No, I didn't," Kelvin stammered, his voice filled with panic. The old man raised a hand to silence him. "The child she carries, it is not yours." A gasp filled the room as the other men stopped their chanting. Kelvin's face turned pale, his lips trembling. "That's impossible," he protested. The old man shook his head. "You have failed. You were warned of the consequences." Before I could fully grasp what was happening, the men turned on Kelvin. Two of them grabbed him, dragging him to the center of the room as he begged for mercy. "Please, give me another chance," Kelvin cried. But the old man's expression remained cold. "You have broken the agreement," the old man said. "The penalty is death." Kelvin screamed as they began their own chants, louder and more intense than before. I closed my eyes, trembling in fear, unable to watch. "Set the girl free," the old man commanded suddenly. "She is not part of this anymore. Her destiny lies elsewhere." One of the men untied me, shoving me towards the exit. I stumbled out into the night, my legs barely able to carry me. Kelvin's screams echoed behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I ran blindly through the dark, unfamiliar terrain, tripping over roots and rocks as tears blurred my vision. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps. I had no idea where I was or how far I'd gone. After what felt like hours, I reached a lonely stretch of road. A car approached, its headlights cutting through the darkness. I waved frantically, praying for help. The driver, a kind-looking woman, stopped and rolled down her window. "Are you okay?" she asked. Concern etched on her face. "Please, help me," I begged, collapsing by the side of the car. She opened the door and helped me in. "You're safe now," she said softly, driving me to her house. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed everything that had happened. Kelvin's betrayal, the horrifying ritual, the realization that I was pregnant. My life had spiraled out of control, and I knew I couldn't continue living this way. The next morning, my parents returned home from their trip. I ran outside as soon as I heard their car pull up, falling to my knees at the gate. "Mama, Papa, please forgive me," I cried, tears streaming down my face. My parents were shocked, but my mother rushed to my side, pulling me into a tight embrace. "Jessica, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. "I've sinned against God and against you," I confessed. "I've lied, I've disobeyed, and I've lived a life I'm not proud of." My father stood silently, his eyes brimming with tears. "Jessica," he said after a moment, "the fact that you've come back to us shows there's still hope. God's mercy is greater than your mistakes." I poured out everything. How I had been sneaking out, smoking, drinking, and the truth about my pregnancy. I also admitted that the child wasn't Kelvin's, but belonged to my loyal boyfriend, who had believed I was a good, innocent girl. My parents listened quietly, their faces a mix of pain and compassion. When I finished, my father placed a hand on my shoulder. "Jessica, it's never too late to change," he said. "We love you, and so does God. Let this be the beginning of a new chapter in your life." And so, I made the decision to turn my life around. I let go of the lies, the pretense, and the reckless lifestyle. With my parents' guidance and God's grace, I began the journey to becoming the person I was meant to be.